Upon arrival, the taxi driver helped Marcus unload his luggage. The clinic building was modest, with peeling paint and a faded sign above the door. Despite its appearance, the clinic was a lifeline for the town's residents. Marcus had visited here several times over the past years, often traveling hundreds of miles to provide care that local resources couldn't offer. As he stepped inside, he was greeted by the familiar smell of antiseptic, mixed with the warmth of human life. Patients waiting, children playing quietly in the corner, and nurses moving swiftly to attend to their needs. "Good morning, Dr. Reynolds," called a young nurse named Clara, her face bright with a smile. She had assisted Marcus in previous visits and admired his dedication. Marcus returned her smile, though it was tinged with worry. He set down his black bag on a sturdy counter and opened it carefully, examining the damage. Some of the instruments were scratched or dented. Several glass vials were cracked and some papers were smudged beyond recognition. Marcus's heart sank. These weren't just tools. They were essential for diagnosing patients, performing treatments, and keeping accurate records. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. There was no time to dwell on frustration. The patients were already waiting, and many of them had traveled long distances to see him. Marcus began sorting through the items, separating what was usable from what needed replacement. Clara helped him, her hands moving quickly but carefully, aware of the importance of every instrument. Together, they arranged the supplies, repaired what could be fixed, and improvised solutions for the tools that were damaged. It was tedious work, but Marcus felt a sense of focus returning. He reminded himself that despite the setback, he could still provide care. The first patient of the day was Mr. Thompson, an elderly man who had been struggling with persistent chest pains. Marcus greeted him warmly, asking about his symptoms and medical history. As he listened, he couldn't help but notice the frailty in Mr. Thompson's hands and the weariness in his eyes. The man had waited patiently, trusting that Marcus would help him. Marcus felt a surge of responsibility. His bag might have been mishandled, but the lives depending on him were very real. With careful precision, Marcus examined Mr. Thompson using the instruments that survived the flight. He noted irregularities in the heartbeat and discussed a treatment plan. Despite the stress of the morning, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each patient reminded him why he had chosen this path, why he had dedicated his life to medicine, and why he could not let a careless act derail his mission. By mid-morning, word of Marcus's arrival had spread through the town. Patients continued to trickle in, some bringing children, others elderly relatives, and a few just seeking advice. Each interaction tested Marcus's patience and skill, but it also filled him with a quiet satisfaction. He moved methodically from patient to patient, adjusting his approach based on their needs and the instruments available. The black bag, though damaged, still served its purpose. It had survived the flight, and so had Marcus's commitment to help. But even as he worked, the incident on the plane lingered in his mind. He recalled the sound of the bag hitting the metal cart, the way the contents had shifted violently, and the helplessness he felt as he watched. It wasn't just the physical damage, it was the disregard for responsibility, the lack of respect for someone entrusted with important tools. Marcus realized that this experience reflected something larger, a system that sometimes overlooked care and caution in favor of speed or convenience. During a brief break, Marcus spoke with Clara about the flight. "I can't believe they just tossed it like that," he said, shaking his head. "This isn't just a bag, it's everything I need to help people. One careless action could have ruined the trip entirely." Clara nodded thoughtfully. "It's shocking, but look at what you've done so far. You've managed despite the damage. You've adapted, and you've continued to care for every patient that came through that door. That says a lot about you, Dr. Reynolds." Marcus appreciated her words but couldn't shake a sense of unease. He knew that ignoring the incident completely would be a mistake. Responsibility mattered, and those who mishandled his belongings needed to be held accountable. Yet he also knew that complaining or seeking retribution could consume him and distract from his mission. He resolved to report the matter to the airline once the day's work was complete, but he would do so calmly and professionally, without letting anger dictate his actions. The afternoon brought a particularly challenging case. A young girl named Lily arrived with a high fever and severe cough. Her mother held her tightly, worry etched across her face. Marcus examined Lily carefully, using the instruments that had survived the flight. He listened to her lungs, checked her temperature, and carefully documented her symptoms. The cracked thermometer and bent stethoscope made the work harder, but Marcus adapted, relying on his experience and knowledge to make accurate assessments. After a thorough examination, Marcus administered treatment and explained care instructions to Lily's mother. Relief washed over the room as the mother thanked him repeatedly, tears welling in her eyes. Marcus felt a wave of emotion, gratitude, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. Despite the morning's chaos, he had made a real difference in someone's life. The black bag, though battered, had helped him do so. By evening, the clinic began to quiet down. Marcus was exhausted but satisfied. He reflected on the day's events, thinking about the patients he had seen and the small victories he had achieved. Yet the incident on the flight remained a weight on his mind. He knew the mishandling of his bag was not a minor issue. It wasn't just about broken instruments, it was about accountability, trust, and the larger implications of carelessness. That night, Marcus sat at a small desk in the clinic, reviewing patient files and making notes for the next day. He typed a carefully worded email to the airline, explaining what had happened and requesting a review of the incident. He described the damage to his instruments, the potential risks to patients, and the importance of proper handling. Marcus's tone was professional but firm. He wanted to ensure that the airline understood the seriousness of the situation and took steps to prevent similar occurrences in the future. As he finished the email and hit send, Marcus leaned back in his chair. The sun had set, casting a warm glow through the window. He felt a mixture of exhaustion and quiet pride. Despite the chaos, he had stayed focused, adapted to challenges, and continued to serve those who depended on him. The black bag, though battered and bruised, had carried him through the day. More importantly, his dedication and resilience had carried the patients. Before going to bed, Marcus packed his black bag carefully, arranging the instruments and papers as best as he could. He knew the next day would bring more challenges, more patients, and more opportunities to help. The incident on the flight was a lesson, a reminder that life could be unpredictable and that even small mistakes could have large consequences. Yet Marcus felt determined. He would continue his work with integrity, patience, and care. No setback, no matter how frustrating, could change his commitment to helping others. As he lay down that night, Marcus thought about the people waiting for him in the town, the children, the elderly, and the families who trusted him with their health. He thought about the black bag, now slightly worn and scratched, and the responsibility it carried. Most of all, he thought about the lessons learned, the importance of vigilance, accountability, and the quiet strength needed to face unexpected challenges. In the darkness of the small clinic room, Marcus felt a sense of resolve. Tomorrow he would continue his mission. He would see the patients, repair the instruments as best he could, and make the most of every opportunity to heal. The incident on the plane had shaken him, but it had not defeated him. Marcus knew that in life setbacks were inevitable, but courage, dedication, and a sense of purpose could overcome even the most challenging obstacles. And so, with a deep breath and a heart full of determination, Dr. Marcus Reynolds closed his eyes, ready to face whatever the next day might bring. The next morning, Dr. Marcus Reynolds awoke early in the small rural town, his mind still heavy with thoughts of the previous day's incident. The black doctor's bag, though now neatly packed, reminded him of the careless handling it had endured. Marcus knew he could not ignore what had happened. It wasn't simply about damaged instruments, it was about responsibility, respect, and accountability. Patients' lives depended on the tools in that bag, and the thought that negligence could compromise their care weighed on him deeply. After a quick breakfast, Marcus returned to the clinic. The waiting room was already filling with patients. Word of his presence had spread, and people had arrived early to ensure they received care. Marcus greeted each person with warmth and patience, hiding the frustration and worry he still carried. His focus, as always, remained on the people in front of him. He examined each patient carefully, listening to their concerns, checking their symptoms, and providing treatments. Even as he worked, his mind returned to the incident on the plane. The flight attendant had tossed his bag roughly onto a metal cart, seemingly without concern for what it contained. Several fragile instruments had been damaged and important patient records had been smudged. Marcus thought about how easily such carelessness could have caused serious harm. If a critical instrument had broken completely, or if sensitive patient information had been lost, the consequences could have been severe. By mid-morning, Marcus had finished seeing the morning patients. He gathered Clara, the young nurse who had assisted him the day before, and discussed his plan to formally report the incident. Clara listened carefully, nodding with understanding. "It's the right thing to do," she said. "Not just for you, but for everyone who might be affected in the future. If this isn't addressed, it could happen again." Marcus agreed. He had always believed that accountability mattered. Mistakes happened, but when negligence risked lives or important work, it could not be ignored. With Clara's help, Marcus drafted a detailed report, describing exactly what had occurred on the plane. He included descriptions of the damaged instruments, the smudged patient records, and the potential consequences of such mishandling. Once the report was complete, Marcus attached photographs of the damaged items, clearly showing the scratches, dents, and cracks. He wrote carefully, choosing words that were firm but professional. Anger and frustration simmered beneath the surface, but Marcus knew that emotional language would not help his case. He wanted the airline to take the matter seriously and to ensure that proper procedures were followed in the future. By late morning, Marcus had sent the email to the airline's customer service department, copying the claims and safety teams. He felt a mix of relief and anticipation. Sending the report was only the first step. Now, the airline had to respond, and Marcus knew it could take time. Still, he felt a sense of responsibility fulfilled.
He had acted to protect not only his own work, but also the safety of patients who relied on careful professional handling of medical tools. After sending the email, Marcus returned to his patients.
More had arrived, including a young boy with a severe ear infection and a mother worried about her elderly father's blood pressure. Each case required careful attention, and Marcus moved methodically, relying on both his experience and the instruments he still had available. Despite the lingering frustration about the black bag, he found renewed energy in helping people who truly needed him. By early afternoon, the clinic was busy but orderly. Marcus took a brief break to organize his thoughts. He opened the black bag, checking each instrument once more. Most were still functional, though some required delicate repairs. He realized that despite the carelessness of others, he had managed to adapt. His preparation and dedication had allowed him to continue providing medical care, even in the face of unexpected challenges. As Marcus worked, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a reply from the airline. The initial message was polite but vague, acknowledging receipt of his email and stating that the matter would be reviewed. Marcus felt a small wave of frustration. A review was a start, but he wanted accountability, not just a formality. Still, he remained calm, reminding himself that patience and persistence were essential when dealing with bureaucracies. Throughout the afternoon, Marcus continued his work. He examined patients, administered treatments, and answered questions with care. He noticed how relieved people felt after being seen, how their gratitude brought warmth to his heart. Children smiled again, adults felt reassured, and even the elderly appeared calmer knowing that someone capable was there to help. Marcus thought about the importance of resilience, not just his own, but the resilience of those who relied on him. By evening, Marcus's day at the clinic came to an end. The waiting room had emptied, and the last patients had departed with careful instructions for follow-up care. Marcus sat at his small desk reviewing notes and planning for the next day. Yet, he could not stop thinking about the broader implications of the incident. It was not only a matter of a black bag being mishandled, it was a reflection of systemic negligence that could have far-reaching consequences. He considered the airline's responsibility. Flight crews were trained to handle luggage and passenger belongings with care, but in his case, the training had clearly failed. He thought about the hundreds of millions of dollars in insurance coverage the airline carried, and how one small act of negligence could impact claims and accountability. Marcus realized that the incident was more than an inconvenience. It had exposed a flaw in a system that was trusted to protect people and property. That evening, Marcus drafted a follow-up email to the airline, this time addressing the potential risks in more detail. He outlined the possibility of patient harm, the need for proper training and protocols, and the importance of preventing future incidents. He included suggestions for safety measures, emphasizing that the airline had an opportunity to improve. Marcus's tone remained professional but firm. He wanted to make it clear that this was a serious issue that could not be dismissed lightly. As he sent the email, Marcus felt a sense of responsibility reinforced. He had taken action, documented the damage, and communicated clearly with those who could make a difference. Yet a quiet worry lingered. How would the airline respond? Would they take steps to ensure accountability, or would the incident be treated as a minor inconvenience? Marcus knew he could not control their actions, only his own. His duty was to patients, to his profession, and to the principle of responsibility itself. The night brought a moment of quiet reflection. Marcus sat by the window of the small clinic room, watching the stars appear in the clear sky. The town was peaceful, yet he knew that beneath the calm, people depended on him for care and reassurance. The incident on the flight had shaken him, but it had also strengthened his resolve. He understood now more than ever that dedication required vigilance, that responsibility demanded action, and that even small acts of negligence could have serious consequences. As he prepared for bed, Marcus carefully repacked his black doctor's bag. He checked each instrument, arranged the papers, and ensured that everything was ready for the next day. The bag was no longer just a tool. It was a symbol of his commitment, a reminder of the trust placed in him by patients, and a representation of the care and professionalism he upheld. Before closing his eyes, Marcus reflected on the lessons he had learned. Life was unpredictable and setbacks were inevitable, but how one responded to challenges, how one maintained integrity, dedication, and focus was what truly mattered. He had faced frustration, disappointment, and uncertainty, yet he had continued to serve others with compassion and skill. That, he realized, was the true measure of responsibility. As sleep slowly claimed him, Marcus felt a quiet determination. Tomorrow would bring more patience, more challenges, and perhaps more surprises. But he was ready. He would continue to provide care, to advocate for accountability, and to uphold the standards of his profession. The black doctor's bag, though damaged, would continue to carry him through the work he had committed to do. And in that quiet moment, as the stars shone above the small rural town, Marcus understood something profound. True dedication was not about perfection or convenience. It was about perseverance, integrity, and the courage to act when faced with obstacles. The incident on the plane had tested him, but it had also reminded him of the value of his work, the importance of responsibility, and the strength of the human spirit. The following morning, Dr. Marcus Reynolds awoke early, his mind still preoccupied with the events of the past days. Though he had been focused on his patients in the rural town, the email exchanges with the airline were never far from his thoughts. The mishandling of his black doctor's bag had set off a chain of events he could not have imagined, and he felt the weight of responsibility, not only for himself, but for the patients who depended on him. At the clinic, the morning sunlight streamed through the small windows, casting warm patterns on the worn floors. Marcus entered the bustling waiting room, where familiar faces and new ones awaited his attention. Children with fevers, adults with aches and pains, and the elderly seeking guidance filled the space. Clara greeted him, her expression a mix of concern and encouragement. "Dr. Reynolds, there's been a response from the airline," she said softly. "They've started an internal investigation." Marcus paused, feeling a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. An investigation could bring accountability, but it also carried the possibility of delays, excuses, or even dismissive responses. He nodded and thanked Clara, trying to keep his focus on the patients who needed him now. The morning passed in a flurry of activity. Marcus moved from patient to patient with careful attention, using the instruments from his damaged black bag with skill and precision. Despite a few minor challenges caused by broken or shifted tools, he adapted quickly. Each successful treatment and each relieved patient reminded him why he had chosen this path. His frustration over the airline incident remained, but he allowed it to fuel his determination rather than his anger. By mid-morning, Marcus received a phone call from the airline. A polite, professional voice introduced itself as the head of the investigation team. The person explained that the airline had reviewed the flight logs, interviewed crew members, and inspected the handling procedures for carry-on items. They, had confirmed that the black bag had been tossed roughly by a crew member, resulting in minor but significant damage. Marcus listened carefully, feeling a mix of vindication and concern. "I appreciate your prompt response," he said. "But this is not just about a bag. It's about accountability and safety. The instruments in that bag could affect patient care, and negligence like this should not be ignored." The investigator assured him that the incident was being taken seriously. The airline planned to conduct further training for crew members, review safety procedures, and document the incident thoroughly. Marcus thanked them, but he remained aware that these promises needed verification. Past experiences had taught him that words alone were not enough. Action and oversight were essential. As the call ended, Marcus returned to the clinic, more resolved than ever to continue his mission. The town depended on him, and he could not let external frustrations overshadow the care he provided. Children laughed again in the waiting room. Mothers and fathers expressed their gratitude, and the elderly patients found reassurance in his presence. Marcus realized that despite the airline's mistakes, his dedication could still make a real difference. Later that afternoon, Marcus took a short break outside the clinic. The sun was warm and a gentle breeze rustled the trees surrounding the small building. He thought about the broader implications of the incident. The airline carried insurance, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, yet a single act of carelessness had revealed weaknesses in their systems. If a black doctor's bag could be mishandled so carelessly, what else might be at risk? Marcus felt the importance of raising awareness, not just for his own sake, but for the safety and accountability of others. The investigation quickly escalated beyond Marcus's initial report. The airline informed him that the mishandling incident had triggered an internal review of multiple flights and procedures. Investigators discovered that several crew members had previously received warnings about careless handling of passenger items, suggesting a systemic issue. Marcus's case, though relatively small in physical damage, had become a catalyst for larger scrutiny. By evening, the airline contacted Marcus again. They explained that they were preparing a formal report for regulators and insurance providers. His case had highlighted risks that could no longer be ignored. Marcus listened carefully, his heart racing with a mix of concern and cautious optimism. This was exactly what he had hoped for: acknowledgement, accountability, and a chance to improve safety standards for everyone. Despite the positive progress, Marcus knew the battle was not over. The airline's reputation, financial interests, and internal politics could all influence the outcome. He reflected on the journey so far, realizing that advocating for responsibility often required persistence, patience, and careful documentation. He felt a quiet pride in having stood up for what was right, even in the face of inconvenience and frustration. The next day brought an unexpected surprise. Marcus received an email from a news outlet that had picked up on his story. The headline read, "Flight crew tosses doctor's bag, potential safety concerns raised." The article described the incident in detail, emphasizing the carelessness of the airline crew and the potential risks posed to passengers and their belongings. Marcus felt a mixture of apprehension and hope. The attention could accelerate accountability, but it also brought scrutiny and pressure. As the day progressed, the small-town clinic continued to fill with patients. Marcus moved from one examination to another, carefully monitoring symptoms, administering treatments, and offering guidance. The work was exhausting, but it reminded him of why he had traveled so far. Each patient's gratitude, each child's relieved smile, each parent's thankful words reinforced his determination. The airline's response mattered, but the lives in front of him mattered more. In the evening, Marcus reflected on the unfolding events. The airline had acknowledged negligence, investigators were reviewing procedures, and the story had gained public attention. Yet, Marcus remained grounded. He knew that real change required more than recognition. It required systemic reform, careful oversight, and a commitment to responsibility. He resolved to continue documenting his experiences, ensuring that any lessons learned could prevent future incidents. Over the next few days, Marcus continued his work at the clinic while maintaining correspondence with the airline. Investigators requested additional details, photographs of damaged instruments, and clarification on the potential impact of the mishandling. Marcus provided everything requested, his professionalism and thoroughness earning praise from the investigation team. He remained firm but polite, emphasizing the importance of accountability without allowing frustration to cloud his communication. Meanwhile, the story continued to gain attention. Social media users shared Marcus's experience, highlighting the carelessness of the crew and the potential risks to passengers. Public support grew, and many expressed concern over the airline's handling of passenger belongings. Marcus was careful not to let the attention distract him from his work. Instead, he used it as motivation, understanding that advocacy and professional dedication could coexist. By the end of the week, the airline informed Marcus that his case had prompted a significant review of policies and procedures. Crew members were required to undergo retraining. Safety protocols were revised and inspections of handling methods became more rigorous. Marcus felt a deep sense of relief. His persistence had led to tangible improvements, not only for himself, but for all passengers who relied on safe handling of their belongings. That evening, Marcus sat alone in the clinic reflecting on the events of the past week. The black doctor's bag, though still showing signs of damage, had survived, and so had his resolve. The experience had tested his patience, challenged his confidence, and reminded him of the importance of vigilance. Yet it had also reinforced his dedication to responsibility, integrity, and the well-being of those he served. Marcus thought about the patients who had entrusted him with their care, the young nurse Clara who had supported him, and the quiet resilience required to face unexpected challenges. The airline's response had been slow at first, but the investigation, the public attention, and the procedural changes showed that accountability could be achieved through persistence and professionalism. As the stars appeared in the night sky, above the small town, Marcus packed his bag carefully, ensuring that every instrument and paper was in place. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had acted responsibly, advocated for accountability, and continued to serve those who depended on him. The incident on the plane had shaken him, but it had also strengthened his resolve, teaching him the value of vigilance, integrity, and perseverance. And so, as he prepared for the next day's patients, Marcus Reynolds understood a profound truth, that even in the face of carelessness and negligence, dedication, patience, and a commitment to doing what is right could create meaningful change. The black bag, though battered, was a symbol not only of his profession but of the strength and responsibility inherent in every act of service. The morning sun rose over the small rural town, casting golden light across the quiet streets and modest buildings. Dr. Marcus Reynolds awoke with a sense of calm determination. The events of the past week had been intense. His black doctor's bag mishandled on a flight, the careful instruments damaged, the patient records smudged, and the airline investigation underway. Yet through it all, Marcus had continued to care for his patients, maintaining professionalism, patience, and dedication. At the clinic, Marcus began his day as usual. The waiting room quickly filled with familiar faces, children with minor fevers, adults with aches, and elderly patients seeking guidance and reassurance. Clara, the young nurse, greeted him with a smile. "Dr. Reynolds, there's news from the airline," she said softly. Marcus felt his heart quicken. "What is it?" he asked, setting down his black bag carefully. Clara handed him a printed letter. The airline had concluded their investigation. The report confirmed that the flight crew had mishandled Marcus's bag, violating established protocols. Furthermore, it noted that systemic issues in the handling of passenger belongings had been identified. As a result, the airline's insurance provider had decided to suspend the coverage of $520 million until the company demonstrated strict compliance with proper procedures. Marcus read the words carefully, a mix of emotions flooding through him. Relief, vindication, and quiet satisfaction mingled with the gravity of the situation. He had advocated for accountability, and now concrete consequences were being realized. The airline, despite its size and reputation, had been held responsible. Carelessness had consequences, and the decision to suspend the massive insurance coverage sent a clear message. Negligence would not be ignored. Clara watched him, sensing his emotions. "This is a big step," she said gently. "Your actions made a difference, Dr. Reynolds. You stood up for what was right." Marcus nodded. "It's not about me," he said quietly. "It's about responsibility, and about making sure that something like this doesn't happen again, for anyone." As the day continued, Marcus's focus remained on his patients. The news about the airline was significant, but it did not distract him from the immediate work at hand. Children needed care, adults needed reassurance, and the elderly required careful attention. Marcus moved from one patient to another with steady precision, using the repaired instruments from his black bag. Despite the previous damage, his tools had been organized, cleaned, and restored enough to function effectively. By mid-morning, word of the airline's decision had reached Marcus's phone. Local journalists and media outlets were reporting the story, highlighting the negligence of the crew and the resulting financial consequences for the airline. Social media buzzed with discussions about responsibility, safety, and accountability. Marcus felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, not from public recognition, but from knowing that the incident would lead to improved safety standards and a culture of greater care. During a brief break, Marcus and Clara stepped outside the clinic. The town was peaceful. Children played in the streets and neighbors exchanged greetings. Marcus thought about the larger lessons of the incident. It was not simply about a black doctor's bag. It was about systems, procedures, and human responsibility. Negligence in small acts could escalate into serious consequences, and accountability was essential in every aspect of life. Clara broke the silence. "Dr. Reynolds, I've never seen anyone handle a situation like this so calmly," she said. "You managed to continue helping people even while facing frustration and setbacks." "That's inspiring." Marcus smiled faintly. "It's not easy," he admitted. "But we have to focus on what matters most. The patients, the work, and doing what's right. Everything else is secondary." Throughout the day, Marcus continued to see patients, carefully documenting treatments and monitoring progress. Each successful case reminded him of why he had chosen this path. Despite the airline incident, the damaged instruments, and the media attention, his mission remained unchanged. People relied on him for care, and he would not let any obstacle prevent him from fulfilling that responsibility. By late afternoon, the airline contacted Marcus again. They informed him that the insurance suspension had prompted immediate internal reforms. Crew members underwent retraining, and new handling protocols were implemented to prevent similar incidents in the future. Marcus listened carefully, noting each improvement. The airline had recognized that their negligence had tangible consequences, not just for a single passenger, but for the reputation and financial stability of the company. The news reinforced Marcus's belief in accountability and persistence. One individual's dedication and willingness to speak up had influenced a multinational airline to review procedures and implement changes. It was a reminder that responsibility, vigilance, and professional integrity could create meaningful impact, even in systems that seemed too large to challenge. As the evening approached, Marcus reviewed the day's patient files and prepared for the next day. The clinic had quieted, and the town settled into a peaceful rhythm. Marcus reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple act of carelessness on a plane, and had grown into a story of responsibility, accountability, and positive change. The black doctor's bag, once battered and mishandled, now symbolized resilience, perseverance, and the quiet strength of doing what is right. Later that night, Marcus sat by the window of the clinic room, gazing at the stars above. He thought about the patients he had helped, the airline's reforms, and the lessons learned. Life was unpredictable and setbacks were inevitable. But how one responded, through patience, dedication, and integrity, was what truly mattered. Marcus felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had acted responsibly, advocated for accountability, and continued to serve those who relied on him. He also considered the broader implications of the incident. The airline's $520 million insurance suspension had sent ripples throughout the aviation industry. Other companies reviewed their policies, emphasizing proper training and careful handling of passenger belongings. Marcus's story had become more than a personal experience. It had sparked awareness and encouraged systemic change. The following morning, Marcus continued his work at the clinic with renewed energy. Patients arrived with a range of concerns, and he moved through each case with focus and care. Instruments were organized, records were complete, and treatments were administered with precision. Marcus realized that despite external challenges, his mission remained consistent: to provide care, reassurance, and healing to those who depended on him. Clara watched him throughout the day, noting the calm, steady demeanor he maintained. "You've turned this whole situation into something positive," she said. "It's amazing how you managed to help so many people while also holding others accountable." Marcus nodded. "It wasn't easy," he said. "But responsibility isn't just about doing your own work well. It's also about ensuring that systems around you are safe, reliable, and accountable. We all have to look out for each other, whether it's in a hospital, on a plane, or anywhere else." As the day ended and patients left, Marcus carefully packed his black bag once more. Though it bore marks from the previous mishandling, it remained a tool of care, responsibility, and dedication. He thought about the airline, the investigation, and the insurance consequences. He understood that accountability was not always immediate, but persistence and professionalism could lead to meaningful results. That night, Marcus lay down, reflecting on the journey from the flight incident to the positive changes it had triggered. The black doctor's bag had been a symbol of both challenge and resilience. It reminded him that even small acts of negligence could have serious consequences, but that dedication, responsibility, and careful advocacy could make a difference. In the quiet of the rural town, Marcus Reynolds felt a sense of peace. His patients were cared for, the airline had implemented reforms, and accountability had been realized. He understood that life would always bring unexpected obstacles, but how one faced them, calmly, thoughtfully, and with integrity, defined the outcome. Marcus closed his eyes, ready to face the next day, confident that his dedication and responsibility would continue to guide him through challenges and inspire positive change wherever he went.